maintain opportunities for apartment buildings while still allowing residential growth. The whole idea wasn't to stop growth, but to make sure that it was controlled. And throughout other neighborhoods in Brooklyn, dating all the way back to 2008, the city has implemented quality housing programs. Even as late as 2020, there was a release of a proposal to have quality housing program in Soho, and so it's still alive and well. The question we have to ask tonight is, why is it that still almost 20 years we are struggling to be able to institute quality housing program, a quality housing program? The whole idea of the quality housing program was to avoid what they call the finger buildings. And you can see to your left, right, I'm not sure, how right next to homes, what materialized. And we'll discuss later why that's possible. But that was one of the reasons, if not the only reason, I don't know, back in 1987, but it was a driving factor to try to combat this development, which is just very chaotic and unplanned. There are quite a few communities that have, I'll go into more detail, quality housing programs. You name it, they were able to do it to preserve their community. So why do we need a quality housing program? Because it helps to preserve home ownership. It provides affordable housing for tenants, because we have to make sure that in our discussions, we don't just focus on one and not the other. Tenants and homeowners are both integrally related and involved in our community. They have a vital role to play, and we need to protect them as well as our small businesses. Quality housing program is really what's contextual zoning. And here in Community Board 17, I don't know if you know this, we do not have contextual zoning. And as a result of that, there is no height factor in terms of the buildings going up. So if you've wondered, why is it possible that right next to your home, you could have a monstrosity of a 10, 11, 12-story building, that's the reason why. There are other factors that can limit the building itself, but in terms of height, there is no limit on the buildings because we're not contextually zoned. So this is another example. You see this throughout the neighborhood where you have right in the middle of homes, this happens because there is no height limitation because we're non-contextually zoned. So how do we address this? And that's the reason why we're here tonight. Because in order to address this, a lack of quality housing, a lack of a quality housing program in our district, it would take a zoning text amendment, otherwise what we refer to as rezoning. Okay. And I took this slide off from the New York's Department of City Planning. So this gives you an idea of what zoning really entails, whether, buildings or could be an R2 area where there's smaller houses, and it goes up on the scale, and you see how it goes as high as to R8. In our district, we have from R4 to R8. Okay. The process involves the community board, city council persons, borough hall, Department of City Planning, the City Planning Commission, the Office of the Mayor, and the City Council. So here you have all these parties who are part of this, and one or more can actually stall this process and impact us negatively. So there are many factors which need to be taken into in this whole process. Okay. So yes, quality housing versus height factor. When the city realized that developers were just able, because of the existing zoning, to just construct as they wish. Well, I don't want to say as they wish or other limitations. The city instituted this quality housing building, which is called Contextual, which we do not have in our district. So We have R4, and we at this point I'm not going to go into all the details, but just to show you very briefly what R4 looks like in terms of the size of the buildings. We also have R5s. We do have R6, and the problem really is R6, where you have development, which is as a matter of right. So I need to point out that over the past 2 years, for sure, possibly even 3 years, all the buildings that you see going up in our community, um, they have not had to come to the community board. They have not had to go to any yellow process to be able to build, because as a matter of right, they were able to do this. And I'm pretty sure over the next past 2 years that not one building, we recently had somebody indicate the special interest on the storage building on Kings Highway. That's been the exception, but all the other buildings going up, as a matter of right, they're able to do it without having to get any community input into it. And then there's the R7s. The height factor, you see, okay. So one of the issues we dealing with have a lack of quality housing, because that's the way we have to see it. It's a matter of quality of life. And we are entitled to as just as much a good quality of life as any other neighborhood in Brooklyn. We have to ask the reason, why is it that we're struggling? Why is it the quality of housing here, the housing program? We have not been able to institute contextual zoning. And that's what we really need to discuss right now. This should be very alarming to us. If you look at New York City, if you look right in the middle here, towards the end, this is Queens. If you look here, this is our community. And as you will see that in the entire area of Brooklyn, the largest area the largest area of home ownership is in our community. And this is the area that is being targeted the most.
Mm-hmm.
This is the area that has unplanned development. There is no structure in place to protect home ownership. Home ownership has always been the American dream to prosperity. That's the way that we create wealth. And that whole area, Community Board 17, is under, I want to say attack, but that's pretty much what it sounds like, it looks like, because there are efforts in place to destroy the little area of Brooklyn where there is a clutter, a combination of not combination, but that's where we have a concentration of Black home ownership. The next slide will show you what has happened to Black ownership, home ownership in Brooklyn, right? There has been
Mm-hmm.
racial displacement and replacement. So look at this. What this slide shows in the orange, the darker oranges, the areas where there was a loss of Black ownership. So you see the Bed-Stuy area over here, right? The darker areas, if you look at it, these used to be areas where there were Black homeowners, and that has been eroded. And given what's happening currently right now in our district, pretty soon, if something is not done, that's exactly the same position we will be. The question needs to be asked, why isn't it important to New York City that Black homeowners are able to continue to live and enjoy the areas in which they live? Why is it that there isn't that support system that creates and fosters Black home ownership in Brooklyn? 1 second, my mouse. Okay. What is so important about Black home ownership? It's a one way that we're able to elevate, people of color are able to elevate themselves out of poverty. Yes, there's a stock market. Here's the 401k plans. But I mean, many people, you have a 401k plan, you go into it, you use it Home ownership enables us to pass on the wealth from one generation to another. So, for example, 40 years ago, someone bought your house. They lived in it for 20 years. They have bought it for $50,000. They sold it to you for $200,000. They accumulated $150,000 of wealth in their house. Now you have the house, you bought it 200,000 for 200,000. Now it's 700,000. That's wealth that you have accumulated. And without the ability to have home ownership, we are losing the ability to pass on wealth to the next generation. Um, One of the things we also have to take into consideration in all of our planning is small businesses. Okay. Um, we have we have very few strips of businesses here in our district. And if we, why is it? We need to ask ourselves as why. If entrepreneurship is so important in the United States, why is it that we're allowing a situation that is stifling small businesses? That there is this notion that we have to have development. It has to be by a transit system. I mean, if you look at Flatbush Avenue was able to develop as a district a business area without a train running under it. The same thing for Church Avenue. So why is it in Community Board 17, there seems to be this notion that we have to use whatever train lines that we have, which can displace small businesses because it's so important, it's so vital, because without being able to develop and display small businesses, then we can't succeed. That notion really has to be explored and determined that's a false narrative. We have in one of the planning we're going to do as we talk later tonight, we have to make sure that there is provisions to protect the small businesses. New York City has a small business department. If it wasn't important, why have the department? And why is it small businesses in other areas are appreciated and not in our neighborhoods? We need to maintain what in all planning, whatever zoning, rezoning we do, we need to ensure that small businesses are factored into it. The whole idea of rezoning is not to decrease the housing stock. We all know New York City has a housing crisis. Okay. We need affordable housing. And we can come up with an intelligent plan that is comprehensive enough to be able to meet the needs to further affordable housing for community residents. So this whole process is not to stop development of affordable housing. It is to have it done in a way that does not disrupt our quality of life. Just to give an example of a quality housing rezoning. So this is what our district looks like. And the very top area is R7 and R6. And that's the areas where there is the matter of right to just develop as they wish. And that's what the real problem has really been. Um, so for example, what are we talking about in terms of rezoning? This is an existing condition with an R6 building right there. It is possible to use that land in a productive way, right? To be able to end up with something which benefits the community. But if we do not have rezoning, what can happen is that the developer, as a matter of right, can just throw in this huge building and distort the character of the neighborhood. So that is why we need to impress on our elected officials, impress on the city agencies that our neighborhood deserves the same consideration that other neighborhoods were given in terms of a quality housing program. So at least when development takes place, it takes place in an organized way, which does not just this it causes our community to look like it's just so disorganized. It may involve a level of down zoning. That's not going to happen consistently, but I think it's important that we also recognize there will be some instances of down zoning. So, for example, if a site, you can have a site like this. This is an actual site in the district, right? If it's not rezoned, this is what can happen. So, right in the middle of lower lower story buildings. A developer can come in and just throw up this huge building because there is no limit on the height factor. Whereas with rezoning, something which is more in context of the neighborhood can take place. This was a proposed zoning plan which was put forward. We were not able to get it through, so we're coming back to the table. We're going to have to negotiate, renegotiate, but we're going to come up with the whole idea of tonight. The real purpose of tonight is to develop a task force to help us to come up with a plan that will work. It will satisfy their the need for additional housing. At the same time, it will preserve our community. This is what's happening to our community. This is like a hostile environment. You are a one family or two family home surrounded. It's like, it sends a subtle message to the homeowner here that you don't deserve to be here. This is all, we are taking over and you need to get out. And it doesn't help that in our neighborhood, we kept getting calls, to sell our houses as if we don't have the right to be here. We've earned the right to be here. We are taxpayers. We're all here because we have the right to be here, and we need to be treated with the respect that comes along with that. This was another building that was able to go up because of the height factor. So there was no consideration for the fact that it was out of place. The developer had the right to do it because the city allowed him to do so because we hadn't downzoned. We had not rezoned. I'm going to say very categorically that an argument of rezoning either means there is a lack of understanding of what as of right means, because without rezoning, if we don't rezone, developers who do not live in our neighborhood have the freedom to come in and be able to construct as they wish. So, I mean, otherwise, if you're against rezoning, it could be a pro developer. Everybody has the right to take a position. I'm just simply saying we need to be clear that if we're going to argue about rezoning, why it is we're arguing against rezoning. And one more point, doing nothing is doing something. There is no such thing as not doing nothing, doing anything. If you don't do anything, the status quo remains. And we are allowing our community to be determined by developers who do not live in the community. So what are we here tonight to do? We need to volunteer to be able to walk our community, come up with a plan. What does that mean? You say, how can I help? Within your area that you live, look, are there places where reasonably affordable housing can go up, development can take place to be able to increase the housing stock? Because what we want to do ultimately is to present the city with a plan that says, here, we are increasing our housing stock with 2,000, 3,000 units, whatever it is. We are doing our share. Okay, we're not going to bear the burden of the whole city. We're doing our share. And in exchange for, as part of this, not in exchange, but as part of this, we're expecting the city to do what it's done for other neighborhoods in terms of preserving the right of home, not the right, but the privilege of home ownership. Because what's happening right now is that if this continues, we will soon feel like we don't belong in this community and that we have to live and be driven out. And in 2023, that's totally unacceptable. I just want to highlight what the email address is. Please make a note of it. So I hope that you will volunteer, and let's get this process open. At this time, I do see that we have certain persons from various agencies. So I'm going to ask them to speak first, and then everybody else just indicate, put your hands up, and everybody is going to have an opportunity tonight to be able to express a viewpoint. Please express it cordially, courteously, in a courteous manner, and hopefully at the end of this meeting, we'll go forward with a definitive path as to how we're going to execute this. I will ask Tim Anderson to speak at this time.
You're not hearing him. I think this is Paris Strotter from City Council, Planning and Land Use. I think Tim had to step away for a second. He'll be back. But yeah, I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you guys yet. So really happy to be here and listen to the conversation. Oh, Tim's back. But one thing I just mentioned before he starts, a lot of the presentation he prepared basically went over the same points. Actually, your presentation was more thorough than ours, so so kudos to you on that. So um, I think we're gonna just highlight certain things to further the conversation, but I think just jumping into the discussion as soon as possible is probably the best thing to do. So Tim, you want to go ahead?
Yes, thanks so much. And thank you also. I had to step away really quickly. I may have to do that again. Hopefully, we'll see how it goes. I do have an infant, so I'll have to tend to her. But thank you for having us. I'm here with Paris and Brian from Council Land Use. I have a presentation, and as Paris said, it covers a lot of what you all of your presentation. So I'm going to pull that up really quickly, and I'll go through rather fast since a lot of this has been covered. So if you all that, so I'll just run through as what was discussed. We're here because of the issues that were in the current zoning. And there's a lot of widespread new development occurring on the western side of the district. Light, and you all have expressed concern for many years about a community plan that works. I'm briefly going to go the existing conditions, the reasons for the rezoning. The timeline, just very briefly, as we found out that you all have been working on this for such a long time, I just highlighted a few notes back in 2015. The Brooklyn Borough President completed a technical study identifying certain soft sites and strategies around a contextual rezoning. And as mentioned, the community board's work with WXY and George James looked at contextual rezoning and trying in different plans to address some of the existing gaps in infrastructure, open space, as well as preserving and promoting Black home ownership in the district. So I'm going to run through this really quickly, but this is 2020 census data, just highlighting that this is a majority Black neighborhood, just under 80%. A little over half of the neighborhood is rent burdened. We did note that there has been a decrease in the Black population during that time period from 2010 to 2020. As mentioned, or if I'm not sure if it was mentioned, but sorry, if it was mentioned before, just reiterating that that about 31% of households in the district are homeowners and 69% are renters, which roughly matches the percentages for the city as a whole. So this is just the land use map of a zoning map of District 17. You'll see that the district split up amongst four council members. Councilmember Mealy in the north, Councilmember Barron towards the east, a large portion of it, Councilmember Lewis and Councilmember Joseph on the western side. And you'll see the denser zoning districts, the R5, R6, R7 to the northeast and west. And then you'll note the manufacturing district along the freight rail cut along the southern part of the district. And then there are also areas of C zones along Utica and along Bedford Avenue. And as mentioned before, just briefly, with R6 zoning, it's governed by lot size, height factor, so you can get some of those large developments in R6. And then you have the option of, then there's also contextual zoning, R6A, R6B, anywhere where you see the zoning and a letter afterwards, which are governed by height limits. So the buildings conform to the surroundings. This is the land use map, just highlighting the built environment in the district. So you'll see that the commercial corridors extend along Church Avenue, Nostrand Avenue, Utica, the manufacturing along the freight rail cut and Utica Avenue. And if you look at the oranges, some of the deeper oranges in the R6, you'll see that those are, larger apartment buildings. In the areas in yellow are more of the 1 or 2 family residential buildings, which dominate the district. So what we wanted to, I think what we really wanted to focus on in this discussion was the western portion, where I think a lot of the more recent development has occurred, and you'll see that in some of the upcoming slides. So you'll see that some of the browns and oranges, those are where there have been, 6 or larger story buildings, where 6 or larger story buildings exist. Primarily in the R7 and in the R6. Everything you see in red on this map was a soft site, as mentioned before. So these are lots that have less than 50% of their residential AFR used. So as mentioned, if someone wanted to develop on one of these lots, they could construct some of those out of context buildings that we'll see in previous slides, and as you already all are well aware of. And these next 2 slides just show you where a lot of the recent development has happened over the last 10 to 12 years. Anything in red are buildings that were built after 2010. So it's concentrated in the R7 and the R6 and down along New York Avenue, around Farragut, Glenwood Road, and Avenue H. And this slide also kind of shows you in the with the little green buildings, kind of where most of those units were generated. So again, in the R7 and in the R6. So I think this wise planning and rezoning needed. I think you've all highlighted that. Affordability is a large issue. It's a citywide issue, and currently there are no incentives to build affordable housing with the current zoning that exists. And we noted that 421A did provide an incentive to build affordable housing, but that's not in effect anymore. So there's really not much of an incentive for affordable development currently with existing zoning. There's also urban design. As mentioned, in the R6, you can get some of these large towers built. There's also an urban design element to it where there are still requirements for parking, so you'll have these issues of front yards being used for parking. So you'll see that in the image below, which creates issues with design with folks walking through. Moving on to some of the more examples of the out of context development along, I think New York Avenue is pretty egregious with this, between Avenue H and Glenwood Road, where you have the Victorian homes next to 5 to 6 story as of right buildings, which have market rate units. So we just wanted to highlight that. And I'll just quickly talk about some of the framing of a possible community plan with potential solutions. So I think one of the big goals that you've all highlighted is to preserve the character of East Flatbush. So, kind of protecting those older homes on a lot of the residential side streets. And I think in particular, the image on the bottom is the most, is that image of New York Avenue between Avenue H and Glenwood Road. So we also wanted to highlight WXY's framework, producing their 2020 study, where they wanted to call for mapping MIH on transit and commercial corridors, and also creating more contextual zoning on some of those residential side streets where you've seen a lot of that out of context development occur. And this slide just shows you some examples of some of those contextual districts and just the kind of new developments that they produced, some in the area and some in Bay Ridge with the R4A. Another potential solution, finding opportunities in the C8 2 districts and C8 4 districts, which are currently occupied by storage units, gas stations, surface parking lots. So no residential development can occur in these districts. as they are. So, you know, we wanted to look at these areas as a possible opportunity for affordable housing. And again, as was highlighted earlier, you know, creating a robust homeowner assistance program, preservation strategy to keep homeowners, longtime homeowners and tenants, you know, protect them from displacement. You know, CD17 has ranked in the top 10 of community districts in rates of eviction filings, rate of foreclosures, rate of dangerous housing code violations for 6 or more unit buildings. So, you know, we really want to concentrate on protecting homeowners and tenants from displacement against these development pressures. Another solution or another goal we wanted to highlight was to potentially create connectivity for cultural and community anchors to address historic disinvestment and support community growth. So a few things have come up, like is the African burial ground on Bedford and Church Avenues. And we really wanted to focus on connectivity to commercial corridors and hubs in the community. To, you know, as you mentioned, you know, support of small businesses is very important. So we want to make sure that we can find different ways to highlight those connections. And then this goal, you know, this next slide just shows you how all of these things are interrelated. So it's not so much that, you know, it's not all about rezoning. You know, obviously we want to create affordable housing. We want to, you know, have safe streets. We want to support small businesses. So, you know, any plan that, you know, comes forward really has to take all this into account. It's not, you know, not simply zoning and, you know, open space, resiliency, and sustainability. These are all, you know, very important topics to the community that we want to, you know, highlight. And finally, another goal that we wanted to address was just, you know, creating equitable development, infrastructure, and investments for the community. You know, so building off of all of that prior work that the community board has done, you know, to really highlight preserving and promoting Black home ownership, as we addressed previously, access to open space, access to quality fresh foods, and to address, you know, poor performance of, you know, buses and limited alternatives to auto use. And I think that pretty much does it. I just wanted to breeze through that. So I'll, you know, I'm really eager to hear everyone, you know, your all's thoughts on everything. I'll stop sharing my screen. And, you know, happy to answer any questions. Just wanted to highlight, I may have to hop off again if my infant wakes up, but Paris and Brian are also here.
Oh, can't hear you right now.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to tell you that your presentation was very encouraging, because I will say that we have been very discouraged. I'm just going to be very blunt. And so, because there's so many, you know, we need your assistance. We need so many, you know, we need everybody to participate in this. I'm really encouraged. Brian, Paul, would you like to say something?
Sure. I don't think we totally explained exactly who we are at the top. Paris, Tim, and I. We're the planners that work for the city council. So we're here. You know, we work with council members Lewis and Joseph and Mealy and Barron, but we've been talking especially to council members Lewis and Joseph about this Western R6 area. So we're not this Department of City Planning. Unfortunately, but we wanted to share our expertise and also get into some of the discussion of those discouragements you're talking about, because that is kind of the key challenge here. Is a community plan. You know, there's 2 ways to do it. In terms of a rezoning, the most typical action is the Department of City Planning, meaning the mayor, the administration, commits their resources to the plan, implement, you know, works with you to develop the zoning framework and all of those other community investments that might go alongside it, and then implements it. But an issue with that for this community board for many years has been, since 2014, the city has been much more focused on the citywide housing challenge and really averse to doing downzoning, and much more stringent about wanting more development to come about the upzoning half of if you're doing a balanced rezoning like this one potentially can be. So that has always been the challenge in getting DCP engaged, is they seem to have some threshold expectation of going up on places like Nostrand or Bedford in exchange for protecting the homeowner blocks. And that's always been the stopping block here. But if they can get more confidence that the community board is willing to take that balanced approach and go up in certain areas in exchange for the down, that's what we think could maybe break that log jam. But it's a challenge, I know.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So at this time, I'm going to open the floor to residents. I'm sorry, I just need to recognize Lucia from DCP. Would you just like to greet the people present tonight?
Yeah, hi everyone. So can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
So for those who don't know me, my name is Lucia Capuccio. I'm the CD17 liaison for the Brooklyn office of DCP. And we've been having great conversations with the board and Miss James. And tonight I'm just here to listen in, but I'm taking notes. I'm going to bring it back to our office, and we're just looking forward to working with you all. Yeah, I can't make any commitments, of course, as Mr. Paul was talking about, but we're looking forward to working with you and hoping to come up with some good solutions. So thank you, Ms. James.
Thank you, and I apologize. It's mispronounced your name. My sincere apology. Okay.
That's all right.
So the first hand I see, Miss Robinson, do you want to speak, or is your hand just up because you forgot to take it down?
I forgot to take it down, but I do have a question.
So you can start because your hands were up first. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Basically, how long does the process take to get a rezoning in place?
Okay. I'm gonna have someone from city planning or I mean, just jump in. If you know the answer from please feel free. Anyone, I mean, just take turns and just because we really want your input tonight. We really want to learn. We want you to hear what our concerns are. So let's just make this open. So please feel free.
Yeah, I can speak. I can just say I think it depends on the rezoning. It can take.
I can't hear you. Sorry.
Oh. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I think you're muted.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Still muted.
I can hear her.
We can hear her. We can hear her.
We can hear her.
Yeah, sorry. It says unmuted. But maybe Miss James can't hear me. I'm not sure why. But I'll just say quickly. The process depends.
Is it me? I'm not hearing.
It's you.
Is anybody else hearing?
Yes. It's you.
Yes.
Oh, it's me. Oh, sorry, it was me. Sorry.
That's okay. No, I was gonna say, I don't think there's a strict timeline for it. It takes years basically because it involves a whole public process. So I think, it can take upwards of probably like 1.5 to 3 years or more. So it's not a quick process. I'll throw it over to City Council if they have other insights, but I think it depends on every rezoning that you do, but it's a long community driven process, and it's not something that's, it has to go through the public review process, which, takes it. Once it enters ULURP, it's at least 6 months, but before it enters ULURP, there's months and typically years of engagement and studies. And so I would say at least usually like multiple year efforts.
A follow-up question. Depending on who the mayor is at the time Does that also affect the process?
Yeah, definitely. You know, anything that our department would support and lead if it was, or work with you, but if you brought us a plan, then we worked with you on it, it would need Mayor Adams' support. So, also, you know, we haven't had a commitment, so far, on that front. So that's why, you know, I can't speak to, you know, a planning process that would occur with DCP, input at this time. Doesn't mean that wouldn't happen. Obviously, we like to work with all of our communities, you know, day to day. As a liaison, you know, people can always reach out to me. I'll put my contact info there. But in terms of like a mayoral sponsored rezoning, it would have to have the support of Mayor Adams.
Okay.
Thank you, Allison Martinez.
Good evening. I wanted to ask, well, for DCP, we have never received a formal response in regards to what was already submitted. So we don't have anything to negotiate against because we don't have anything from your side that we could point to that said, you know, maybe you should reconsider this area or anything like that. So when exactly might that happen, or is it not? And then for the city council side, I wanted to know what discussions are being had within City Council about one, the holistic um, land use plan that was under Corey Johnson's administration when he was Speaker, that was pushed forward to revamp how land use was looked at. I want to also know what the City Council's discussions have been in regards to the current mayor's City of Yes plan and the new housing plan that was released, especially as it relates to the parking, elimination of like the parking requirements for most of the buildings, which you have a severe impact on a community that's very laden with cars necessarily because we haven't had the investment of public transportation. And the reality is even people who come to the community without cars eventually end up with them anyway. And then I wanted to know what discussions are being had with the other players throughout the ULEP process when it comes to the M1 area and the governor's intention of adding in commuter rail back in there. Is that something we can use then as to negotiate some different incentives for zoning there to get the preservation that we're looking for in the residential context?
DCP. Let's see.
And city council, that's.
I'll just start because I was going to say,
Yeah. Good.
yeah, thank you, Ms. Martinez. I'd have to get back to you on that in terms of a formal response.
City
Anyone
council.
from City Council?
Okay. Where to start with that one? So yeah, part of the challenge that you're experiencing is that like New York City has no set cycle for doing community planning or updating zoning like some other cities do on every 5 or 10 year basis or something like that. So it is always a discretionary decision by the mayor and DCP where to do a plan. But a lot of what influences where they make those choices are, you know, support from the local community board and the local council members and the borough president on a general framework of sorts, like some kind of a shared baseline to start, and which is kind of what the WXY study did a lot of that already for you in some ways. So that might be a good place to start re-engagement with that on the basis of that framework. There's no real discussion right now about bringing back a legislation to totally revamp the planning process like that Corey Johnson proposal. We're looking at maybe some more incremental things, like the speaker announced a housing platform a month ago, possibly looking at legislating, spreading around, requiring the city to do housing targets for each community board, which would kind of be an incremental step towards that and would maybe jumpstart things like this community plan. What else? Oh, the interborough RX. So that area along that M zone in the district is all classified as a IBZ in the city's policy, which are kind of geographies drawn around what the city considers its most important industrial areas, because areas that best for the industrial companies and infrastructure that's like the necessary for the city to function, the base of supply chains, and lots of good jobs and infrastructure. That area is considered one of those because of the freight rail access, and that the freight rail access is going to remain with that plan to add transit to it. So the freight rail is still going to be there. So I don't, right now I have not heard that the mayor is looking at IBZs for residential. The last administration had a policy of saying IBZs are for industrial. We're not going to consider residential there. Everything I've seen so far, that's still in place. So that would be, but maybe.
I wasn't
Yeah.
suggesting a transition to residential,
Yeah.
but leveraging the city of Yes plan for like net carbon zero and for small
So
to
yeah,
leverage
the
that.
city of Yes is another thing, which is
Yeah.
zoning text amendments
Mhm.
to the whole city zoning, which means that going in and changing the underlying rules that exist for all the existing zoning districts in ways like adjusting parking requirements is one of the things. So that's going to be something that affects the district for sure going forward. We don't have all the details on it, but city planning is looking on how to adjust things like that to make it easier for folks in the R5 and the R4 to build new buildings. So that's by adjusting parking requirements, things like side yards, some more arcane pieces of zoning too. But we will have more details on that's not going to start until next year. But that's something to watch going forward. But that in itself won't address the problem with the R6 in this area.
Thank you. Valerie Booth?
Yes. As a resident, a community resident, I have no experience working with the city at all. So I'm just an observer. Over by that, I think it's R6, that area, New York Avenue. But you were talking about, I'm pretty familiar with the buildings that have gone up over there. And I'm listening, and there is some idea that the city is trying to solve its or help asking the community to bear its share of solving the affordable housing problem. So that's probably part of the reason why they've put up those buildings. Am I understanding that clearly? That's part of what, ostensibly why those buildings have gone up? Because it doesn't seem to me when I go over there, I go over to the junction pretty regularly, and I see all those, very egregious looking buildings going up. And a lot of the Victorian homes are being torn down. And to be honest, a lot of them that are being torn down do look like they're unoccupied. And unfortunately, for reasons we probably are not best to discuss here, why they are unoccupied. But I'm wondering what percentage of those buildings that have gone up really have residents in them, because they seem empty to me. One just went up on the corner of 34th and Glenwood, and it's been completed now for a few months, and it doesn't seem to me to be a single person in there. I walked down the block and there was tons of parking. So where are these people that, if those homes are being built to help the affordable housing situation, where are the people? Because it seems like the developers come in, whatever deal was cut with the city, they get their money, they put up these structures, and they're gone. And I don't know whose responsibility it is to now make sure those buildings are rented, but they seem to be empty to me. So, does anybody have any idea?
Yeah,
Insight?
I'll jump in here. I can't speak to the occupancy of the buildings. Although I think if they're empty, they're probably just waiting on further approvals from the city before renting out. Having just been on the rental market in this general area of Brooklyn, it's very difficult to find an apartment. So I'd be surprised if there's a lot of vacancy. But I don't have that information. I just wanted to highlight just briefly your question or the point around these buildings going up as part of the addressing the housing crisis in the city. What we said in our presentation, and what the lady sorry, I don't remember your name, that gave the presentation at the beginning, said as well, is that this is unplanned. This is not deliberate from the city. Basically, the zoning is out of whack and hasn't been changed for decades. So it's not that the city is allowing these buildings as part of addressing the housing crisis. It's just improperly zoned. And most of these buildings, unless they're taking advantage of 421A, which now is expired, as Tim was saying, and probably most of them did, but they didn't have to. They are not necessarily including any affordable apartments. It's mostly all market rate. And actually, in this part of Brooklyn, I think affordable is 130% AMI under the old 421A,
Yeah.
which really is market rate. I mean, it's a kind of a ruse, in my opinion. But so I just wanted to clarify that it's not an intentional policy from the city. It's that there's a lack of planning and it's a lack of policy.
Yeah, it's clearly obvious that it's a lack of something, because with all those apartment buildings that are going up over there, if well-to-do folks are going to move into those buildings, I just have one question: which supermarket are they going to use? Because there's nothing over there. There's an Aldi that was opened up, which I have never been in there, but it doesn't seem to be offer very much. I mean, well, probably a lot in there, but I don't know how, in terms of square footage, how big it is. I guess I understand there's Food Bazaar is going to replace Shop and Stop, but that's way up further on Flatbush. And there's, I think, I forget what it's called, used to be a Met Food somewhere on Glenwood and Flatbush. So, I mean, what that's just one service, so I'm just something isn't right with all of this. But I'm going to leave it to my city council people and others with a lot more experience to move forward. And this is, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, that's actually, you brought up a very critical point, because there is a misunderstanding that most or some of these buildings going up are to address the affordable housing issue. And that's not the case, except if they're taken, as I mentioned by Paris, and taken the opportunity to benefit from the 421 tax break. But even when I asked a survey of a particular committee last night, how many people here actually know people in the community who ended up renting or living in any of those buildings? It'd be interesting to know, because on that particular committee, nobody knew anyone from the community who had benefited from being able to move into any of those buildings. I think the next person was Marguerite Vigilant.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, just to follow up on that, those buildings are not meant for people in this community, and that's part of the problem. They're not meant for us. But that's not what I wanted to say originally. It's very important that we get a response from DCP, because I feel like we've already done the work. We have a plan. We proposed it. And if we don't get a response, it's like we're reinventing the wheel. We're going to come up with another plan, but we already have a plan. So before we really can do anything, we need a response. And I'm very frustrated that we're still in the same place we were 3 years ago, after we, did all this work with WXY, and we put together a plan. And so that could be the plan that works, but we don't know, because we have no response. So that's my comment.
Point when taken, one of the things that we can do as a community board is to, formally request a response from DCP. So that will be taken under advisement,
We did.
brought to the executive committee to request that they follow up with DCP. Edwin Joseph.
Hi, good evening. I mean, this is my third meeting with the Rezoning Committee, and it just dawned on me that I moved to this neighborhood about 8 years ago, and I remember Jumani had a meeting in the school across the street from the community board, and I know they mentioned that they were in the process of putting an application to rezone the community board 17. So I'm just trying to understand, is it something that's been in process already? Because it's been 8 years I've been here. And that was the first time I heard about this 8 years ago. So did this happen already? Or this is like something that we're going to do now? And how come he said that to us that 8 years ago and nothing was done.
As I said in my initial comments, we've been struggling with this for over 18 years, and actually probably it's 20 years right now, while other communities have been able to do it. That's just a fact. Hazel Martinez, I hope I answered your question very clearly, meaning that for whatever reason, okay, in spite of good efforts, we have not been able to do it. And in the meantime, our community is being devastated. Whether it's benign neglect, whatever the case may be, doing nothing is doing something. By DCP and every other city agency not doing anything, they are standing by and allowing our community to be decimated. They're allowing homelessness. I personally witnessed 2 hard-working women who went to work every day, who enjoyed working. One of them ended up with her daughter sleeping on the floor for about 6 months in somebody's apartment. She works at the airport. The other one was sleeping in her car. And these are hard working women. This is a critical issue. Okay. It's something that needs to be addressed, because every single day that nothing is done, it increases the homeless burden. So on one hand, the city not allowing us to rezone is adding the additional expense of homelessness, because eventually this lady had to turn to the city for resources.
So do we know what's stopping this from happening though? Is there like a person?
So that's the reason we're having the discussion tonight. So we're hoping that going forward and talking about how long it takes, given the fact that we've been standing in line for 20 years now, we're hoping as a result of this meeting, we'll be put at the top of the line and the resources given to help us make this a reality. So we don't want this to be another 3-year process, 5-year process. It can be done a lot more expeditiously.
The issue has basically been, I respond really quickly. It's like since 2014, DCP has not done a neighborhood rezoning that is primarily a downzoning. That was a change in their policy under the prior administration, based on this recognition that they had done citywide too much downzoning in all kinds of other neighborhoods in Brooklyn and Queens, and so there was this decision: we're not going to do any more neighborhood rezonings that are primarily downzoning, and that's where this has gotten stuck for 8 years, because then I think in order for DCP to come in, they have to have more confidence that there is support for an upzoning component to the plan, and that's why this always gets stuck, because so maybe what could get it unstuck is re-engaging with that WXY framework and some kind of statement that the board does support some degree of upzoning in areas to balance the plan. I don't know. That's where it's always gotten stuck in my understanding.
Just on payment, I think we just need to just like, go on social media and just make a big deal about this because this is ridiculous. I know there are some community will never touch just because. So we really need to do something about it because, at the end of the day, I'm trying to leave my home for my child and, we cannot be destroying our community. We cannot let that happen in the community. I think there's things that we can do. I think that we just need to be loud about it.
Thank you. I think Hazel Martinez was
Yes.
next.
Oh, good evening. I have a couple of comments because number one, the last meeting we had with DCP, they told this was an in-person meeting, and we were told that when we presented our plan that they actually told us that they were planning for the new residents. They weren't making any decision on our proposal until the new administration came in. The new administration's been in there for some time now, and we've heard nothing. And I don't believe that they felt that we have a lot of large homes with might only be one senior living in it, and these new residents and the new jobs they plan to have in the city, they would need to build these things, these homes, these buildings. These buildings are not quote affordable. They're not for the residents that currently live here. Even the senior center, the affordable residents they built at 1488 New York Avenue, only one person in this zip code got a room in it, and it's all studios. They don't think that seniors need more than a studio, which is not really practical in all cases. And so I think it has a lot to do with race, because there have been several other districts that have rezoned more than once, and we have not rezoned one time yet. The other issue I have is, and what you're making is a transient community, because I look at those buildings on New York Avenue, and one year you see one person on the patio, the next year it's a different person. There are no services in the community. The sewer system has not been reached. The infrastructure has not been upgraded to work with the amount of people you are now bringing in. We'll have beautiful single homes with lawns. Now you have concrete fronts with cars on the front, mailbox on the sidewalk. There's nowhere to walk, and it can't absorb the water. So now you want to put in bioswales to do what? We need the sewers upgraded. You have a lot more people living there, and half of those buildings, there's no one living in them, and when they live in them, they stay there very short time because they're built very poorly, and there's nothing. The rent is too high, so no one could stay there. And the other problem we have is that, unfortunately, these the transit zone that they plan to make, the concern is that there will be more attention paid to the small homes in this R4 section that we have near it, and then those people will be losing their homes because the city will find some reason why they need to get rid of them as well.
Thank you. Just to raise a point, thank you. Sometime earlier this month, I reached out to WXY and said, look, every day that goes by, we're losing homes. Every day that goes by, we're impacted. We want to re-engage, and we're willing to pay you. Okay, I checked with the district manager. Do we have money in the budget? Before I even spoke with him, that we can re-engage WXYZ to update the plan, so we can present something. I was told, he said to me, and I have the emails to support this, that it would be necessary. He wanted to speak to DCP. So I said to him, look, my major concern is, and I was speaking at that time, I said, we want to make sure, however, that small businesses in this neighborhood are also protected, because that wasn't really a conversation I've heard much of. I wasn't privy to much of the conversation before, but I wanted to make sure. I said to him, look, the areas we can identify for upzoning, okay? There are certain blocks which are already gone, okay? It doesn't even make sense not to upzone there. We will do it, okay? And the message which was conveyed back to me was, unless we are willing to sacrifice, it wasn't put that way, but unless we are willing to sacrifice the businesses on Nostrand Avenue, right? That they will not even engage us. And so WXY made it very clear that they would not even have any further communication with us because we needed to do that. And I think it was grossly unfair. And as I said earlier, there are many areas in Brooklyn that do not have a train station running under it, Flatbush Avenue, Church Avenue, and there are viable businesses there. Why do we have to sacrifice? Nostrand Avenue is really the only, and Church Avenue. Anybody who wants to be an entrepreneur, that's the only place that they can go to. Why should the dream of being an entrepreneur but not be limited to other people and not them? That's where they can get around. And you're asking us to be able to save our houses. We need to sacrifice small businesses. I think that's an outrage. And I think that's something that has to be considered because there are way around it. And I sat and I said, look, there are blocks here we can get, we can offer, they can be upzone R7. It will work. There are wide streets here. Let's do this. Let's make this happen. And the specific communication was that we have to give up Nostrand Avenue, that whole stretch of small businesses, barbers, restaurants, whatever it is, give that up to the big developers in order to move this forward. Otherwise, they will not engage us in any discussion. And that needs to be made public.
But we don't have elected officials either that are really doing anything to push this issue, I don't feel. I've seen it, we've been around too long and they're not really, the other areas, their elected officials are really, advocate on their behalf, and I don't see that here.
Thank you very much. Who did I not recognize? Chair Daly. Did he step away? Rod?
No, I'm here. It's just I was trying to find the unmute button. So I first of all I want to thank you, all of you guys. I mean, I'm looking at the numbers for this committee, and there are 28 people on this call, or 27 including myself. So this tells me how important this conversation is on our community, right? I was there when Jumani was making an effort to address the rezoning. I know strongly that Farrah Lewis's office has expressed major interest in what we're looking at with rezoning. So I do think that we have their support. I just think that we need to come up with a game plan that they're supporting, right? They're not going in. And I remember when Darlene Mealy gave some money years ago to look at the rezoning. I did speak to Council Member Charles Barron today as well, because he's now going to have a large part of our community. And one of the things that I spoke to him about was the concept of rezoning. So those are some of the issues, just to say, how can we work in a relationship wise with our city council and our political partners to ensure that what we want done to get done. As a board, I feel very strongly that we have to give something to get something. So we have to identify, specific areas within our community where we can say, okay, no problem. This is not a problem with rezoning, upzoning, but while maintaining the culture of our community where we have single or two family homes primarily, right? So we have to look at, and the small businesses. So we have to take in consideration everyone's concept. I think, however, one thing that's important to me is the concept of affordability. Affordable for whom, right? And you're right. I hear when Chair James said that she doesn't know anyone who actually got an apartment within our own area. That means that what happened to people now, my sons are 21 years old, 22 years old. Where are they going to live, right? Do they have to move out of the community? So then our numbers are not looking what they need to be. So we need to really look at affordable and affordable for whom, and maybe even the concept of the people within our own communities having the first right to get in, right? So to get into these places. I think these are negotiating tools that we have to put in there, that our community remains genuine to the people who grew up in this community and not forced to move out to other areas because of affordable. My 21-year-old twins can't afford, if they're going into an apartment in 2-3 years, they can't afford $3,000. It's not going to happen, right? Unless they live together for the rest of their life. So we have to really look at affordability. And I know there was something in Congress about revisiting what the AMI should be, right? And I think that they really need to look at that because, in fact, right, in fact, there there is no real true affordability for the residents of Brooklyn if you're going to compare it to people who make 3 or 4 times as much money, right? It's really not affordable for people. So I think those are some things that I feel that need to go into the conversation around rezoning. How does it affect our community? How do the people in our community get the first right? What are we willing to give up? How do you protect the small businesses and protect the culture of our community of single and two family homes? And the last concept is about parking. It's killing me, right? We really don't have it. What's happening when you put these buildings in and they go right at the point where I don't need to provide parking? How do we address that? So these are some of and so I think our chair is working diligently to look at the map, look at what needs to go, and so we need to, as a committee and as a board, to come up with things that we are going to present to City Council. So I thank you guys so much for working together to try to get this done. And I'm very proud of the work that you guys are doing. So thank you. Oh,
Would any city agency want to comment on what the chair has said? Okay, we'll say that you took it under advisement.
No, hi, this is Lucia. No, I wrote this in the chat. I'm listening to everyone, and I understand that it's been a very long and frustrating process. I've only been at DCP since December of 2021. So I know that there's a long history that I wasn't there for. But I'm going to bring this back to my director of the Brooklyn office tomorrow, and I'll let them know about some of the things I've heard tonight, and also that there's a very firm wish for a formal response to the letter that y'all sent. So that's all I'd like to say at this time. But I do appreciate everyone's. We're sympathetic to the the development that's been happening that's been out of context in the area, and as I said, we do want to work. We have been working with the board, and we want to continue to work with the board as we move forward.
Thank you, Adele Bennett.
Yes, good evening. What I was going to say is I agree with you, Ms. James. It is unacceptable after all this time, all the work that was put in, and I was there, myself, Allison, Hazel, and a few others, not to get an answer from our city agencies. A firm answer after all these years. It's like we don't deserve one. Or is there something else going on we don't know about, or what we should know about? It is unacceptable.
Thank you. And in response to that, I will send an email to the chair asking that on behalf of the committee that he send a letter to DCP requesting a formal response. So this is one productive thing that has come out from this meeting. Not one, but one of the many, I hope, productive things.
I was there. We did the walkthroughs. We all over the whole community, section by section, just to give them what they asked for. Now they have already built what they wanted from us. So it's not like we're going to get credit for that. And the buildings are going up left and right. So what about if we wait? They are still building. And oh, by the way, there's a hotel being built on Church Avenue. The address is 2239 on our border again.
That's a very valid. That's a very valid.
Yes, sorry, it's going to be 8 stories. Mm-hmm. And it's on that land that's part of the burial ground area.
That's a very valid point, because in the time this whole delay, so much building, so much development has gone on. And they're going to want to start from scratch and say, well, what are you going to give us now, right? Without getting credit for any of the development that took place. I think we have CK Price first and Antoinette Smart. CK
Good
Price.
evening. Good evening. Good evening. Sorry, I wasn't expecting to hear my name. I had a question and a comment, I suppose. My question is, if the community board, not community board, if the city council member isn't as engaged in a particular area, how much more difficult does that make things for us as the community board? And I ask that because the way this particular board is set up, I think I have 4 different city council members, and I can see that getting tricky. My comment would actually be to reiterate something that Allison said earlier, at least in the chat, which is I really feel that I don't know the history, the full history of plan that was put before. So I'm really interested in learning a little bit more about that. But if for some reason we do need to either reaffirm or come up with a new plan, reaffirm that old one or come up with a new one, I think it is important that we do something that is going to be comprehensive and far reaching and not simply a matter of protecting home ownership, although that is definitely something we need to do. That's all I really had. But if someone answer my first question, I would really appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, if the wider an area and the more parties are involved, the more complicated it is. One variant for you all to consider on that is, potentially refocusing on the western part of the community board, which has really been where the vast majority of the problem development has been, the Brooklyn Ave West. You're only dealing with 2 council members. If you look at that area, it's a narrower geography, less time. It would take less time for all the environmental review work and all that. It would be faster if you narrowed it a little bit and more, and maybe something that the city could wrap its head around quicker and get going. That's one idea, rather than the whole community board or even that other area of R6 that's on the border with Board 16 also.
Yeah, and just to add to that, it's also an expense for DCP because the larger an area, the more budget they need for environmental review. So but one way that you could do both in terms of both addressing the issue on a faster pace, but also do the planning that you want to do is you as a community board can come up with a plan for the entire district, but recognize that it might have to be phased a little bit, and so otherwise, if you focus on the west where there's a major crisis that needs to be addressed now, but then do some of the planning work on the eastern side to say, well, this is going to be the crisis on the eastern side at some point. If city, if you can't address this now from a timing perspective, then we're putting in the request now. Come back to us when you have the chance. But so it's something for you guys just to consider. Certainly, you could expedite the process by narrowing the area, as Brian was just saying.
Thank you. And I think the last speaker that we have is Antoinette Smart.
Hi, yes, good evening, everyone. I'm listening to this, and as Miss Martinez has mentioned, both Hazel and Allison, as well as you, Miss James, we have been doing this for so very long, so many years. It's almost, you begin to get a feeling as though you wonder if the council folk and our elected officials are in collusion with the developers, because the more we negotiate, the more plans go on the table. It's the more homes are being decimated and the more of these hideous buildings are going up. And we're wondering, like, there was a plan put forward that Alison Martinez spoke about before, as well as Ms. Villante. And I agree. I was there. I listened to this when this plan went in place, and we never got a response. The response was never forthcoming. So that is still out there. And we were willing, as you mentioned, Ms. James, I'll piggyback on you. We were willing to downzone certain areas, but I agree, not at the risk, not at the thing of losing, at the sacrifice of losing our small business owners on Nostrand Avenue, not at the sacrifice of losing the community, the cultural sense of the community. This has been ongoing for way too long, way too long. And for some reason, I feel that they're just trying to pacify us. And now I'm hearing it's going to take another year, another 2 years, another 3 years. And quite honestly, I live in this neighborhood. I've been here for 22 years. And by that time, I've totally lost hope. There's going to be no more homes left. There's going to be just these hideous monstrosities that I am totally surrounded by in my community. And please, let's not speak on parking. Let's not speak on parking. My driveway is blocked almost every evening. Almost every evening I come in from work, my driveway is blocked. Folks are totally taking over your area, taking over your parking. You cannot get into your driveway. This is an unbelievable situation. Hopefully we can get to this in a shorter span of time than the 15 or 20 years that we have been going through with this, that I have been familiar with CB 17. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you. And on that note, I think everybody who wanted to speak at least did get the chance to speak at least once. In consideration of the time, we're going to end. But I want to say this goes more than beyond just the monstrosities that are being developed. It goes to the fact that we are being displaced, dispossessed, okay? Being treated as if we have no value, we don't count. And that's, to me, is the worst part of all of this. We are American residents, we are American citizens, and we deserve the same rights, respect, and privileges enjoyed by other residents of Brooklyn. And first, I want to thank the city agencies who came out tonight. We are encouraged. We want to believe that this will be a new day to move forward, that 2-3 years from now, we will not be talking about this. I just have one other point to say. While the city if the city chooses to be complacent going forward, there is a cost to it. And the cost is additional homelessness, additional crime, because young people who are now being displaced, whose parents are homeless, they're homeless too. So on one hand, you're helping the rich developers get richer, and in the end, all taxpayers are poorer. So it's incumbent on all of us to work together. We're not going to agree on every single point, but it has to be a place where we can compromise that is not detrimental to the community for the benefit of New York City and for the benefit of Community Board 17. On that note, I just saw a hand go up I didn't see before. Have you spoken before? Oh, that's sorry, that's the chairperson. Sorry. On that note, I would like to thank every single
hand
one.
is up.
Who's my hand?
Ms. Frazier.
Please go ahead.
Myself,
Your last.
I do have a
Yes.
comment.
Good evening,
is,
everyone. Again, thank you, Ms. James, for such a valuable presentation to the community. You did mention a task force earlier at the beginning of the meeting. So those who are interested, would you like them to contact the board, submit their emails? I don't know. I would really like you to
please do
follow up on that.
Thank you. Please do, because we do need community engagement now. So even if it's just around, the 4 blocks around your home, to communicate and say whatever ideas that you have, let us know. So take responsibility for your immediate vicinity as to how you can make this happen. I'll put my email in the chat, and please feel free to reach out also to the district manager. She's very responsive in terms of communicating with me, so you can be assured either way, I will get the information. But let's all get engaged. It's not enough for just to come together and talk. We need to do something. We need to act. and let's do it. We can make this happen. We can make our elected officials and we can make everyone in the city realize that, you know what? We are not just going to be complacent. We're not going to be walked upon, that we have value and we want our value recognized. And by the way, I had reached out to the city council person a couple of times and I did get a response yesterday. So meeting, she's asked to meet with me tomorrow. So that's a positive step going forward. On that end, I think everybody has spoken and it's 9:07. I would like to call for a motion to adjourn this meeting. And thanks again before I adjourn. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Marguerite, okay, Hazel, go ahead, you do it.
I already did.
Second,
Motion to adjourn. Adele Bennett.
second.
Second, Antoinette Smart.
Thank you very much and have a very pleasant evening. Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.